All right, welcome everybody to the Sprint Jump Throw Performance Podcast. I'm your co-host Joel Reinhardt, along with Andrew Cormier. I'm excited today to have on Terrence Kennell, who is the strength and conditioning rehab coordinator for the Astros. Thanks for coming on.
All right, thank you guys for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking forward to it. So cool. We'll hop in with our first question. Do you think starting from a sports performance education background makes for a better and more targeted approach when it comes to the rehab process?
Mm, I think in some ways, yes. I think a lot of times on like from that medical side, they tend to look at like individual pieces of a bigger puzzle instead of thinking like the entire system as a whole. So I think that's probably where maybe have a bit of like an S&C rehab side. But luckily enough, as well, like I was able to work with like really smart physiotherapists and things like that when I was in London. I kind of just got thrown into the rehab position like while I was there, just because it was an opening within the club I was working for at the time within rugby. So I was really lucky in that end. And then I think some of it also comes to like kind of turning down, shutting down your own ego about it, and realizing that like the physios or like the ATCs or like the physical therapists, like they have a body of work and and deeper knowledge of like anatomy and physiology more than likely than like yourself do. So being able to have those conversations and get them involved as well, and not thinking like, oh, like you don't know anything about training at all. It's like, well, you don't know much about the medical side either.
Yeah, for sure. So you did this over the last few weeks on your Instagram. I really liked how you laid out the specific stages of rehab and the kind of the principles that you help or that help guide you through that process. Starting with you had stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can just start talking your way through those and how you kind of came up with those, and then we can just kind of whatever comes up off that would be great.
I think some of it came with like the conversations working with like a physical therapist, working with like a physios and stuff. And I understand that when they're in that early stage post, it mainly has to do more surgical based. When they're in that early stage post surgery, like as an S&C coach, there's not a whole lot you can really do with them. I'm like, because you worry about infection, like wound healing and health, things like that. And that's where it needs to be more led by the person who's had clinical experience and worked in a hospital and worked in like that
Yeah.
clinical physical therapy clinic and stuff like that. Um, Otherwise, you may potentially do more harm than good in that area. So let them handle that side, and you can kind of then you step in, train the other limbs, because like otherwise you don't want to decondition the other tissues of the body. And then, so I think that kind of helped guide my thoughts a bit more, and just having those set stages. And they came across like we have conversations with players and like doctors and physios, so everyone kind of understands where players at. Because the players, especially that had a surgery, so they're gonna be out for a while. They're gonna have questions more than likely, like, "Oh, where am I at?" And things like a calendar don't just really define it, because a calendar is more built for like the health, not necessarily doing that performance side. Because like just because you're 3 months post ACL doesn't mean you can jog. Like that's just where the calendar says it's like you're at 3 months post, so you should be able to jog. But you may have other complications occur to where that's not happening. But that's okay. But you need to have an answer to that player or to that physical therapist. But oh, they're in this restoration stage or they're in this development stage and things like that. So it helps create a bit of a common language and a bit clearer like sight for the athlete as well, and a bit of like mental kind of calmness about themselves. Like, so yeah, ACL's gonna be a long time, and Achilles rupture is a long time. Then baseball, Tom and John's a year minimum before they throw in a game again, really. So like being able to have a clear kind of sight of like you were in this stage, and this is what the stage kind of looks like for you. This is who are kind of your key point of contact in this area. This is what we're going to do on my side in the stage, and this is what we're going to do on the medical side at this stage.
Yeah. I mean, that almost seems more realistic too, because, we know there is so much individuality across people. It's hard to be like, oh, you're 14 weeks post. You should be exactly doing this. It's like,
Yeah.
well, or you're 14 weeks and 2 days post, you should progress to like, we know that that probably doesn't hit everybody. So
Yeah.
that's why I liked having those like more stages versus exact like week or day counts.
Yeah.
That was what when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's really solid because it could almost help from like a psychological standpoint. If
Mhm.
a kid like, oh, my buddy, ACL is now so common.
Yeah.
Somebody knows somebody who had an
Yeah.
ACL. Well, my buddy at this point was running, or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, or even, I guess this will help segue into like your pro setting of we had an Achilles last year, and it was hey, like I saw Emmanuel Sanders was back at 7 months from post Achilles, and like how can I get there? And it was like whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, do you run into that at all in the pro setting where a lot of the injuries are so public, essentially, where it's oh, so and so came back from Tommy John in 11, like let's shoot for that,
Yeah.
or do you have to kind of manage that a little bit?
I'll say with Tommy John, I'd say probably not as much because within baseball, within like your own organization. So I think we have somewhere around 200 players. Everyone has a multitude of people who've had Tommy John, and so it almost helps a bit because the players didn't have those conversations like, hey, this player had Tommy John 2 years ago, and like he can tell you like, oh yeah, I started throwing again, my shoulder started to hurt, or my elbow started to hurt a little bit, but it wasn't an issue. It was just the natural progression of you're starting to throw baseball again. And so I think from a Tommy John point of view, not as much, but on the lower limb side, we have more of that. So we have an ACL kid now who still doesn't have full extension of his knee, and 2 weeks ago said, "Oh, I think I'll be ready to jog in 3 months." And the PT and I would be like, "Yeah, it's like it's not really, it doesn't work that way." And the problem is he's had an ACL before, and he knows we've done ACL as well. And he's like, "Oh, well, they were jogging at this guy was jogging at 12 weeks. He was jogging at like 10 weeks." I'm just like, man, it's probably not gonna happen for you. I'm like, don't worry about the dates. The dates don't really matter. Like it's more like where you currently are within those stages and how your body's responding to the added stimulus we're putting on.
Hmm.
And even more complicated now because he hasn't been able to have a gym in months at this point. So
Yeah. Okay. Or even like I found this with some injuries, it's one way, some injuries it's the other, where the like typical timelines end up almost being the thing that can hold people back. Is like, oh, well, we got to wait to do this until this threshold, which is sometimes a little arbitrary. And it's like,
yeah,
well, I mean, we're like 6 days earlier than that. Can we just start doing that?
yeah,
Something. Uh,
100%. That's why I think, lucky enough with the Astros, so I didn't have this when I was in Richmond, because we were like a semi-professional rugby club. But most of the Astros, because you have a lot of value on like the sports science side, we have a lot of ways of being as objective as possible. Now, obviously, like numbers don't show you the full picture, but they can at least paint a bit clearer one, and that's allowed for on the like return to play side, rehab side, to kind of define those stages a bit more. So we have like entry criteria and exit criteria for those stages. Like if they're hitting, instead of taking them 4 months, it's taking them 3.5, and they're at where we need to be. Then like we can feel more comfortable anyway, progressing them on to that next stage, because we know they come within 10% or whatever this criteria is. They've come within 10% of it, like for their injury. So we know, okay, we feel a bit more confident. We can put them in a later stage, add a bit more stress, a bit more stimulus to them, and see how they respond.
yeah. What specifically are some of the metrics that you guys look at? And
So
upper
yeah,
body and lower body.
so upper body was still working on just because just the elbow is just so different. But big one for everybody is like our force frame, like internal, external rotation, internal, external rotation strength. Using like the force frame, so just turn the paddles like sideways, like you do for a groin bar. Um, on the lower extremities, where we have a bit clearer areas, like force plates, things like that. So these are some of our force plate, like counter movement depth is a big one. Um, Peak landing force, a general concentrated impulse, so the overall force producing. eccentric decel, RFD, the asymmetries between all of those metrics as well. Ignored board is always helpful. Groin bar if it's applicable for the injury, sometimes it's just not applicable for the injury. ISO squat and ISO single leg squat, and then ISO peak plantar force as well. I like the an ISO rig. We have like an ISO rig, like I think Kairos, I think it's the company name, and like they made like a full size one. And so basically for the stages, it goes like your strength development. So in that strength phase, we're trying to get those single leg squat numbers, single leg peak plantar force, and then more in the stage of that strength development, more that power kind of phase of it. We look at counter move and jump, and we even get a sub match. So even a sub match is gonna tell us something. It doesn't always have to be a maximal. Maybe a single leg and double leg, and then it'll go on to like a drop jump, 10-5 pogo test as an end stage elasticity and speed realm, and then we still have like obviously things like a speed gate, but that also.
When you guys go into, I guess, closer to getting them to almost like full play, say, I mean, I can just say like a Tommy John, for an example, when they're getting back to like throwing, are you having a lot of input on the like numbers, intensities of throws, or is that like, I'm sure you work with a coach if it's a dual thing, but like, how does that kind of work for you guys?
So I'll have a look at the like throwing like pitching calendar and the volumes, but like I don't personally have a whole lot of input because I don't come from baseball backgrounds. I still am like upskilling myself on a lot. Lucky enough, we have like a rehab pitching coach, and they work with our physical therapists, and they create like a whole throwing calendar essentially of like they'll map out someone's throwing calendar basically for the entire rehab process, like all at once. They map it out the next 12 months and make adjustments if needed, and it'll be based on distances, volumes, intensities. Example would be like a guy may throw 20 throws at 75 feet, then maybe rest 15 minutes and they have to do it again. So just close to like to be able to ramp up, throw, maybe not necessarily throwing hard, cool down a bit, and then throw again without any kind of pain or hindrance.
And how does that work? I mean, throughout the entire organization, like I'm sure you guys have to deal with guys getting moved up and down levels, possibly like somewhat consistently. I'm assuming you guys have to have fairly solid communication from like top down of like, this is where this guy's at, if that's the case, or whatever it is with the return to play.
Look it up within baseball that once a guy gets injured, whether it be like our Latin American Academy in Dominican or like Major League or anywhere in between, they all get sent down to West Palm for a facility down there, and they stay down there the entire time of their rehab. They may go away for like Christmas holiday, Thanksgiving, things like that, but other than that, they stay the entire time. It's almost like in this isolated like bubble a bit of like you just have to worry about rehab, training. There's no like media around. There's nothing else, no other real distractions other than the fact you're in West Palm Beach and there's nice beaches.
That's awesome. How does that work? Is it fairly similar with most other organizations? If I had to take a guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So most teams have like they're either based in Florida or Arizona.
Okay.
And that's where they'll send all their return to play, long stage rehab guys. I'll get sent down there.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
When you're bouncing back and forth with your PTs or ATs, how do you, it ends up being kind of a flowy. There's no like hard like cutoff, but how do you determine as a team like, okay, this specific work is going to be handled more by the AT or PT, and then you're going to take more this other specific work. How do you guys go about communicating to ensure that you're not doubling up on anything?
So big one for us is when I came in, we were lucky to work on kind of create some established, I don't like to say like a rehab kind of philosophy document. And then me and the PT involved in that. And so we broke down the stages, either like more so to like almost like subsections. And so like acute response and like range of motion. And we know like that off the cuff gave to the PT, like you need to find how this looks for you, like what your principles are at, and then so that's gonna be your baby. That's your skill, that's your area of expertise. That's not my area of expertise at all. And I'm just gonna assist in any way you can. Any way you need me to help, I can help you out. And then as it progressed on from like the range of motion, acute response, basic function of a limb, then it goes into like your strength, power, speed, and that's not principles on the document. And then once they saw that, and they were like, oh, okay. So once you do that, then you're just gonna assist me in some areas on the back end. And so understand just where each other falls within those 4 kind of sections. Yeah, I should pull it up right now. So yeah, so it'll break down to in that restoration phase, be acute response and range. This is obviously way more ATC PT led.
Yeah.
And then that preparation or that development will be function and strength. So function was almost a bit more half and half, but then strength would be mainly led by S&C, so I'd be led by myself. And then it would go in that like realization, exploration phase, the more end-stage rehab. That's at power and speed elasticity. That's fully gonna be led by me. ATC like help on the back end, assist with any like minor things that may come up. So I think having those set and then them feeling involved and it truly being like a collaborative situation, like helped a lot. And they didn't feel like I was stepping on their toes. I didn't feel like they were stepping on my toes. So I think that's where things kind of get jumbled up when you don't create definitions, and everyone's just kind of it's just a flowing collaborative environment. It's like that's all fine, dandy, until you disagree.
Yeah. Or even making sure that you're using like the same language.
Yeah.
I've used the example before where it's like, hey, we're gonna, this guy really lacks, or this guy has really stiff ankles, and as a S&C, I was light, like he's got some bounce.
Yeah.
And then somebody else was hearing it as like, oh man, he's got no range of motion. Like, and it was like almost like getting on the same page with, because our different fields sometimes have different like meanings for different words sometimes.
Yeah.
And even if it's a slight difference, it can, if it comes across to the athlete, sometimes it can be so confusing because they're like, wait, you said this and you said that. So yeah, that's a big thing. It's cool to hear the coming up with almost that document before you even get to anybody. So it's like general principles. That's cool to hear. I feel like that happens, like that kind of get together, big meeting. Okay, so-and-so has a meniscus tear. We're all getting together. Here's the plan. I feel like that definitely happens on a individual injury basis, but I feel like that's uncommon in just like a general sense of like, hey, before even any injuries get here, let's lay out our collaborative principles essentially. So that's
100%. So much as that does just being like proactive about it. And it's about, we know where guys are, we know what these kind of things generally look like, and then we just piece by piece individualize based off the need.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of comes back to like, good rehab kind of just looks like good training at a certain
point. 100%.
With the the collaboration of the modalities and the restoration stuff that is coming from the true medical side. So as the continuum starts to go towards working more and more with you, that naturally lends itself to much higher intensity outputs from the athletes, which can in the rehab process, the psychological barrier to that can usually be the biggest thing. How do you, maybe you individually and then you as the team with the PT, go about helping any sort of those like psychological blocks from guys coming back?
I guess if it's an issue of a guy being apprehensive of like trying to produce a lot of force or run faster, things like that, good to have live feedback is always really helpful. So using things like a speed gate. I told Sam this a couple weeks ago. I've stolen his speed gate golf and use that like after rehab with guys. I was telling him like, hit this number to try hit this number as many times within five reps, and that kind of helps them realize it a bit. And we want to start doing that to some extent on like the throwing side as well. So I think a lot of feedback definitely helps. I think especially within baseball players, because they're so used to getting lots of information, because you have things like Rapsodo, K-Vest. There's so many data points, such like an analytical sport, that helps a lot from a personality point of view that guys usually want to know.
Yeah.
Another one which I've used before, I think rugby is that I just don't ask guys how it feels. Like I let them tell me. But
Yeah.
I'll watch it. I don't know. Oh, we're doing. Maybe say we're going a couple build ups, or some flying tens, or if they're like really, really late stage. Then I'll just watch, and I won't say anything. I wait for them to say something like, "Oh, this like, I felt like I was going slow," or "This felt a bit off," and things like that. Because some guys I find, if you ask them, they don't find something to say. They feel they need to find something to say, as opposed to just being like, just kind of shut up and let them figure it out.
Yeah, for sure. I've seen that. That's a good point. I mean, I don't know, at the levels of college football that I've worked at, we've had a lot of almost like the like grinder type of dudes.
Yeah.
Where it's like I have to do the opposite, where it's like
Yeah.
specifically ask every single time, or else we'll get to like the end of 5 reps and they're like, all 5 of those felt like shit, and I'm like, what did you tell me?
Yeah, it's definitely knowing your person.
Yeah,
Definitely
for sure. Yeah, it's kind of back and forth. And even like you mentioned it specifically with the shoulder. How, I don't know, that was an area we had a quarterback coming in from high school, came in with a labral tear on his shoulder, throwing side, and redshirted to then get that taken care of. But even for us, it was fun to like, that was a new challenge, I guess, because like you have these overarching principles of, you know, rehab, like we touched on, of, you know, progressing load and intensity and all that. But then the shoulder is just such a different beast. And the throwing motion specifically, whether it be baseball, softball, or even like a tennis. How did you, when you got into the baseball realm, what kind of resources or things did you lean on to like, all right, I got to dive in on this shoulder, elbow, scap, a whole entire kind of process, I guess?
Big one was like Ben Ashworth, and looking at stuff is done with like the Ash test, ITY, some of his research, and some of the stuff I was lucky to be exposed to, like working in rugby for like a long time. Because within rugby, like you always, it's not a matter of if shoulder, it's just how many shoulder inches you're gonna get. And so that helped a lot. And from the throwing shoulder, some like Cressy's shoulder anatomy stuff is quite good. Talked a lot about the scap stuff. But other than that, it's not like a ton of throwing shoulder, throwing arm research out there, which makes the job so much harder than it needs to be. As it feels like sometimes.
Yeah.
I think there's some research in handball that I've seen, like European handball, with basically, if you guys are familiar with, it's basically like basketball. It's like on a basketball court, but it's like a mixture of rugby and soccer and basketball on a basketball court, and the dudes are massive, and they throw like 60 miles per hour trying to throw into a net, and it's insane. But there's a bit of research in that from that sport, from a throwing shoulder point of view, but other than that, it's not a whole lot. Like Cressy and Ben Ashford, I'd say the 2 big ones.
Yeah, that was an area where we were definitely some Cressy stuff, but it was fun to just like almost, we did a probably one of the bigger roles in the return to throwing, like numbers and distances and all that, and it was kind of fun to just be like, to actually run into an injury where it was like, I've never interacted with this before in my career, and it was almost nice to not have preconceived notions about it, while still realizing, you know, the flip side of that is I don't know anything about it. You don't want to be a clown and screw something up, but yeah, it was a cool challenge, and baseball definitely presents with some, you know, not even just from a shoulder standpoint, but from like a rotational, like oblique, like that those sort of issues are things that often don't pop up in other sports.
Yeah, oblique strains are big, especially for position players who take so many swings. Like there are guys who take well over 100 swings a day.
Yeah.
For 6 months at a time.
Yeah.
I think that's the cool thing about baseball and softball is how much like video feedback I know a lot of places are starting to use now too. I mean, we talked to Zach Dakin about that too, of just seeing how people pattern everything and working on that. Now, do you get into that with guys as they're somewhat in the return to play, with even if it's slower speed, kind of patterning of whatever skill they need to kind of get back to. Do you address that at all?
On the pitching side, more so than the hitting side. But yeah, so we have like, since if there's small pieces of the puzzle, then like kind of figure out that rehab side from like a movement, whether it be like a hip load, ability to hinge, things like that, lead stability. They will attach some of that and like within rehab, especially when it's things that are that easy to add into a program that can almost be like a bit of fluff for them, and it's like not strenuous at all. And so we can add those when we add those kinds of things. That's really helpful. Luckily enough, we have like high speed cameras. And our pitching coaches are really, really good and really, really knowledgeable in that area and can convey what they're seeing to let someone like me who doesn't know anything about pitching.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, do you have or have you had much back and forth with some of those coaches that obviously know how to like operate some of that whatever equipment is needed to just like get a better idea of values that you guys need to get to from the force side of things, whatever it is, from velocity of swing and everything like that too?
Yeah, so like we keep two hitting coaches and for sure always one at the facility, and then same thing on the pitching side. There's always at least one. Usually there's two pitching coaches also who have like tons of experience in all the technology stuff like KVS, blast motion, on the hitting side, on the pitching side, Rap Soto, Edgertron, all these high speed cameras that I don't understand really. um, they get like 1,000 frames per second or something like that. Like they're like, oh, just like, do you see that? Like, that's where I'm like, I mean, I can look at it, but I don't know what I'm looking at.
Yeah. Let's see. Question I had. So what non-sports related profession do you think has had the biggest impact on your coaching and just like overall approach to the kind of sports process, I guess?
Non-sports related profession. It would probably be music producing and fashion designers are probably the two biggest ones. Probably because like I'm really into music, and now I really like into like street fashion also. So I'll listen to podcasts with different people who are really big in music, in the music world. As far as like producers go and like technical like sound engineers, because it's the idea of taking something essentially out of thin air or idea you have and finding all different little pieces and trying to make them work. And similar thing on the fashion side of you have an idea, you have a sketch, a drawing out of what somebody kind of want to look like, then like finding fabrics, designers, manufacturers, and things like that. How you want it to look, how you want it to present, how you want it to even be like from an advertisement promotion point of view, and finding all those different things, get them to then work to hopefully make money. Or have someone buy it. So I think those are probably the two biggest ones for me.
Yeah, that's cool. For me specifically, I've always found stand-up comedy really interesting in that realm. Like, I don't know, maybe not even like from their creative process, but just from like a career arc, where
I agree with that.
You're guaranteed to eat shit for like 5 years, and then some people kind of stay in the middle, and some people get real big, But
I always use stand-up comedy as like the greatest parallel to coaching in terms of like a feedback, because like you're standing in front of people, you're delivering a message in some form or fashion. You get instant feedback, whether you're a comedian or a coach. It's like either they understand all what the fuck you said, or they know exactly what you said and they think it's funny, or they understand and they're gonna do the drill or whatever you're having them do like correctly because they understood and you conveyed your message well. But from career arc, that's actually a good point too. Like, yeah, you're gonna be working really, really hard, really long hours, and sometimes obscure places, make nothing for a long time. Then all of a sudden, you hit and you're famous in a day or whatever. Or like now you have some full-time job that pays you really well and everyone thinks you know everything.
I think what's funny too is like if you're doing a mediocre job and people are giving feedback, they immediately think that they can do better than you because it's like a very easy thing to do to like get up and talk to people. Or like it's easy to work out, so I could definitely write up a workout program for people. Like, obviously.
Yeah. Or even with the immediate feedback of the people interacting with you, but also like either you won the game or you lost the game.
Yeah.
And there's so much of the behind the scenes work that goes into those. Like, I mean, for us, it's 12 3-hour segments, 36 hours out of the entire year that like actually determines if we're good or not. Like,
Yeah.
which is wild. Well, obviously we know there's hundreds of hours behind the scenes, but it's like, if that 1 hour on the stage or those, 3 hours on the field don't go well, then it's like, it's very obvious, um,
Or I think like if you're how comedians talk about, oh, I'm talking about a comedian, like one of the first things to say is like, oh, you don't seem very funny. Well, like, tell me a joke. When we tell people you're an S&C coach, you work in sport, it's like telling about the time they played football back in high school or something, or like they're trying to lose weight, or like trying to get a bigger chest. I'm like, man, I don't want to have this conversation.
yeah, no kidding. So I guess bringing back a little more specifically to S&C, you have over the last at least couple years been, and you've posted about this on your Instagram or whatever, had the opportunities to present, and I don't know if consulting would be the right phrase, but with several organizations at probably a time in your career where most people would be like, oh, that guy's really young to be doing that.
I got some of those messages.
Yeah, and I'm sure you get the positive messages actually sent to you, but then the people who behind the scenes are like, whoa, that guy doesn't know anything yet. But
I mean, I get some of those messages too, but
but how do you think regularly like presenting has helped you? Because like with the stand-up comedy, like you can write all these jokes behind the scenes, but then actually putting them in front of somebody, like that's a different deal. So has that helped you in terms of like sharpening ideas?
I'll say it helps find the ideas definitely, because of that, like I'm talking about that feedback, and then understanding that how do you break something down to a point where it's clear and concise, but maybe not so like elementary, like you're talking to a player. So finding that kind of like common median, that middle ground of like it's complex enough where you're not wasting people's time by speaking in a super elementary level, but then it's also they're still getting something out of it, but you're not talking over people's head either, and trying to make yourself sound really, really smart.
Yeah, for sure. I know that's a reason that both of us wanted to, when we started the website, it was like, the opportunity to write articles, not only just from like, hey, we think this is a good idea and other people would benefit from it. It was almost more selfish of like, if I have this idea floating around in my brain, there are leaps in logic that you can take in your own head that when you have to write it down or speak it to another person, you hear it or you see it on paper and you go, that's stupid. Like, what was I thinking? And so that's an area that I know I've benefited from it, where it's like you almost have to refine because like if there's one little crack in logic or a step that's missing, one of those people who's hearing you present or reading the article or whatever is going to be like, is going to point it out probably. And that's ends up being beneficial from like helping your own coaching. It's definitely.
I think a big one is just also to just understanding to like how to refine it and make it concise, but then being comfortable with the fact that you can't put everything on paper. You can't put everything in a presentation. And there's a blog I used to write at the end of all his. He was like an investor for a long time. Like this guy Naval Ravikant was like an angel investor. Talked about him, and he says so at the end of his blog he's always put but of obvious exceptions, because there's always that one person who's gonna feel the need to point out, oh, well, like there's this one time, and it's like, oh, sweet, good job. It's like there's always gonna be some obvious like exceptions to every single thing, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's something valuable for, especially like when you're younger, coming up in the field too, and like especially like Joel, our experience of just like Springfield grad school, of like someone writing an article and reading that, there's way more depth to it than what they're talking about, but just being aware of that, because you would read something from someone who's like, oh, okay, that concept is like super easy, but you don't really understand the underlying factors to the principles that they're talking about. It's just like, I can apply this, But then once that ideal scenario that they're laying out in the article or presentation isn't there, and you have to like adjust it, it's hard to, because you really don't know what makes up what they were kind of talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Other questions? The value of editing in post. But I just had something on the tip of my tongue. Oh my gosh, this is gonna bug me. Oh, yeah, I remembered it. So you have a group of friends that are strength and conditioning coaches, and I mean a lot of strength coaches fall into this because we just like end up spending so much time around each other. But what have you found as the value of like keeping and like really keeping up that that group outside of maybe just like bouncing ideas off of each other? What is the value of like having that almost like support network that isn't directly where you work?
Oh man, I think it's like highly invaluable. So people always talk about like networking and things like that. I think sometimes that gets jumbled up with the idea of just like just collecting people. It's like knowing there's a difference between knowing a lot of people and then being in relationship with a lot of people, having an actual like friends relationships. Because there's so many coaches and practitioners who they know a million people. They know people all over the world, all over the country, and things like that. But it's just so different than having like actual conversations with people like every day or like every other day or like regularly. You can talk about things that aren't just coaching or S&C ideas. You can talk about like how you're struggling maybe with like in your day-to-day life because you're S&C coach and you probably make pretty shit money and you work a million hours and sometimes you feel unappreciated and things like that. So being able to have those very candid conversations with people and create lasting relationships that are more than just like a work-related kind of thing or, oh, I'm friends with this person because they can help me in my career. It's like, no, it's like you're friends with that person because you actually do care about each other. And like most of them, people like Kier, people like Zach, people like that, like I would invite, if I ever got married, like, I would invite them to my wedding. Like they become like friends. And so I think that idea of networking has to be reframed to an extent to where it's not just collecting people like a bigger and bigger circle or having more and more like connected dots. It needs to be like you're creating actual relationships with people and like you're friend, like you're actually friends. You're not just, oh, I know this coach who works at this school and like he's a coach, I'm a coach, and we talk about coaching. So like no, it's like do you know that person's birthday? Do you know that person's sibling's name? Do you know that person? Do you know where they're from? Do you know like where they spend most of their time? Things like that. And, like all those things are so invaluable. I think that kind of gets lost in S&C because everyone either wants to be really hard, tough guy and thinks everything's all perfect all the time. Because I never complain. I'm first in, last out, or whatever. And I realized, like, hey, like, it's okay to be like, man, sometimes this job is really shit. Like, it's okay to be like that sometimes. And it's good to have people who are like, yeah, man, like, it actually can be kind of shitty. Like, and if you ever want to talk about it, we can talk about it. Or, oh, I have this idea of on a business side. And if you're like, oh, maybe I can help you refine it a bit more. Maybe I can help you add to it and things like that. Maybe that bounces other ideas too.
Yeah, and
So
even like
instead of having the stay in a grind kind of friends, like people just tell, oh, it's just stop being a grind. It's like, okay, dude, relax. This isn't a coal mine. I wear shorts and t-shirt every day.
yeah, those I feel like having those more like personal relationships, you get more genuine feedback anyway. Like
yeah,
if it's somebody who is still kind of surface level, they're more apt to just be like, yes, yeah, good idea.
yeah,
Versus like, I mean, me and AC are close enough now where it's like, if something like, hey, we got this idea to put up on the website or some other idea that he's going to implement with the team, and we do it respectfully. We'd be like, that's not a good idea. Or like,
yeah,
hey, that's a good idea if you tweaked it like this. And, we're more apt to do that because you know, 90% of the time that we're talking, it's just shooting the shit.
Yeah.
And then there's
100%.
10% where it's like, all right, let's lock in and get this done. But yeah, it's nice to see people in strength and conditioning like posting about like, hey, we went on vacation and like, or just like having fun, as opposed to like, went on vacation. First thing we did was find a gym that was open at 5. Like, all right, some people are wired like that. I get that.
Yeah.
But maybe just take a few deep breaths, I guess.
Yeah. Or like the idea of vacation is like going, went to a conference and we all wore polo shirt and chinos, and we had a beer the first night, and then we worked that at 4 a.m. Like,
yeah,
that sounds terrible.
Yeah, no kidding. So this is one that I wanted to ask you as a younger coach, because me and AC have run into this for ourselves too, kind of being in the same like similar arc in our careers. Looking back, even just like 1 year, 2 years, it could be 5 years. What concept in sports performance do you think you butchered early on, and you look back and you go, man, I really screwed that up, and I've improved along the way?
Oh, I have a hilarious one. Was a butchered triphasic early on. Well, I was 20. Yeah, I was 20. Yeah, 20s. I was probably started like program for like teams and stuff. So we did triphasic of every exercise. we did asymmetric block and isometric. We didn't do the concept. We essentially an isometric of every exercise for 4 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks of the eccentric. Like a week, like a down week, and then 3 weeks of isometric. How no one exploded, I still don't understand. I think it's purely because of the fact that I was doing it too. I was doing it for the rugby team I was playing for in college. And I think purely people only explode because we were all between the ages of 18 and 22, and we could survive. But in hindsight, I was like, man, I could have really fucked all of us up. We're doing like 4 or 5 second eccentrics like on every lift, and it was 3 times a week, full body.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get away with that stuff. Like, we are all probably lucky that we work with young people early on, because like you can get away with like absolutely burying kids for like months at a time, and then they're like, I don't know why I've been sleeping really bad, and then you're like, it's probably because you go out drinking on Friday night. It has nothing to do with the 8 hours of stress I'm giving you.
It was brutal. It made it worse is like, as I was like going through it too. I was still playing, so I was also like doing the sessions like on myself. I was like, I'm so sore. I'm sleeping terrible. My body hurts all the time. And luckily, how no one got hurt. Surprisingly, everyone got stronger. It's like, yeah, man, no shit. But man, it was brutal.
Those are the fun ones to look back on, though.
Yeah.
I know I had one from my GA where we were doing some like isometrics, and looking back at the percentages, that we were like, how did kids not explode? It was like way too up there. But it was like, that's almost like the double-edged sword of, like Andrew said, being in that population. I guess that kind of that serves as a nice segue. Being in pro sports, you could have, I mean, especially baseball, you could have an 18-year-old and a 40-year-old. So how much has that, I guess maybe made you like sharpen up with working with older athletes, or just maybe more like appreciating the nuance of, age in a athletic setting, and especially when it comes to, rehab, and, an ACL with an 18-year-old is different from a ACL with a 33-year-old. So how much has that shaped ends, I guess?
I'll say it helped. I mean, I had a leg up this, I'll say, going into it, because when I was in Japan with Kier, we had a couple guys who were all blacks who were in like early to mid 30s and played a million rugby games at that point. Had played in World Cups, and their training is going to look so much different than our 20-year-old or 22-year-old Japanese kid who would run through a brick wall at a moment's notice. And it's like, so I think that's kind of helped a bit, and also helped the language barrier side too. So I had a bit of a leg up going into it, so it wasn't as much of a culture shock coming into baseball. And even within my rehab group, a 29-year-old and a 17-year-old. My 17-year-old barely speaks English, and every time we WhatsApp message, I'm basically talking to Google Translator. And then my 28-year-old, 29-year-old, like our conversations are very succinct. He knows what he knows exactly what he wants to say. And it makes that conversation super easy and quick. Because he knows, because he's been through it before, so he's like, oh, it's this, and this. That's it, and he's really easy. Than my 17-year-old, it's a whole other conversation because I have to be more kind of almost like an older cousin or like an uncle to him because he's only 17 and he got signed at 16. Been living at the academy up until better part of a year at this point, up until now with COVID. So now he's back at home, in the Dominican. And so understanding how to communicate between those two parties, not just a cultural difference, but also a word usage, how the conversation flows, all those other things. I think play a huge factor. So, but luckily, because of that time in Japan, it gave me a bit of a leg up into the situation.
Yeah, that was going to be part of my next question was I don't know, I've only ever coached in the United States with English-speaking athletes. So how beneficial was that for you? I mean, you had a little bit of the help in Japan with some of the English-speaking players, but I mean, now baseball, I mean, a lot of players are either going to be, speaking Spanish or, a lot of Japanese players as well. How much you started touching on it a little bit, but how important is, I guess some of the nonverbal aspects, have you gotten sharper with those and cueing with somebody who you literally don't speak the same language as?
Yeah. I think a big one. So the nonverbal stuff like demoing exercise decently helps for sure. I think a big one too that is also here called word economics. And so just saying what needs to be said, not all you can say. So say the most important thing and then kind of shut up. But otherwise, they're in their second or third language, they're taking us a longer time from the process what you're saying. In Japan, we had a player who was Korean. So English was his third language. Because he had Korean, Hangul. Then he learned Japanese. He went to university in Japan. And then he learned English. And so with things with him, you have to be a bit more slow and be very succinct. This is what we need to see. And that's it. And then you have to let him figure it out. Another one is trying to learn the language too. It's trying to learn the language as well. Helps a lot. And so showing you giving that bit of effort, helps the players kind of buy that trust a bit more. That you're at least trying. It's your Spanish may be crap, or my Japanese may be crap, but I'm giving it a slight effort.
Yeah. Just showing that you're at least pushing a little bit. Yeah, we have a couple true freshmen that are German, and it's been, they both speak fine English. They're coming to school in the United States and taking classes in English, so they're obviously good. But there have been some nuanced things where they look at you and go huh? And you're oh yeah, English is their second language. It's been fun to it's been a fun challenge of something that, coming up in whatever your exercise science classes, you don't get taught that. Hey,
yeah.
You might have to, the best player on your pro baseball team might not speak a word of English, and everything you're saying to them is being translated through a third party who might not know anything about strength and conditioning. So you better get good at that. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
I remember we had a translator in Japan. We had one though for the entire team, and we had some other coaches that were also English speaking. And we say in speech, we say run like your hair is on fire. All right, normal thing to say, but in Japanese that translated to, at least the way it was translated to the players was, if you don't run fast, I'm going to light you on fire. The players just stood there confused, huh?
Hey, same. If it gets the same product, I guess might get to an HR complaint, but Oh well,
Wow.
that's fun. That's good stuff. How much? I mean, I forget exactly looking at your stuff. How young you were when you were with Kier. How much did that um challenge you to like step your game up real fast? Because he is. I mean, he's someone who's very well known and well respected, but also seems kind of on his shit when it comes to anything related to his athletes. So interning under him early, how much did that force you to like really step up?
I'll say it forced myself a lot, and then because it gave me a lot of coaching responsibility as well. Like
Hmm.
coach responsibility, some sports science responsibility. And it's just like, it's like I'm giving you this stuff to learn and like do well at. But just because you learn it doesn't mean I expect you to do a bad job. You're gonna make mistakes as everyone is, but like you just gotta take the initiative to like learn and get better at this stuff. So I was like from day one, coaching on the field and like our speed and change direction agility sessions, coaching like conditioning, coaching in the gym, and also had like, the GPS and the polar stuff as well. And then that was my job to like print it off, print off for all our coaches, for director rugby, for Kier also, make sure the players also wore it from like the first day off a plane. And so I think just being thrown into that fire a bit helped a lot. And the idea is like it's what I wanted. Like I kind of idea expecting that going into it, but so I think because of that, like probably forced me to upskill really, really fast. So I was like, I really want to do this job. And I really want to do it really well. And I want to do it for a long time. These are the things kind of like it takes. So I just had to adapt.
Yeah. What like overarching qualities do you think helped um apply to those more specific situations? Like I guess the example I have was when I was at Nickel State, it was the soccer team got new GPS, and it was the
Mm-hmm.
head coach asked me, "Hey, do you know how to run this?" And I had no idea. I'd never interacted with that system before.
Yeah.
But the answer was absolutely. And then, I'd read the manual for the next 48 hours and implemented it after that. Like what, going into those new situations, even if you don't know the specifics, what overarching qualities do you think helped you, whether it's just like, critical thinking and principle based kind of thinking, what do you think helped you flourish, I guess? Because obviously you did a good job with Kier, or else, probably wouldn't be where you're at.
um, I would say being principle based and having the end goal like in mind and having some bit of end goal for yourself like long term, and having a bit of like that purpose. I think that then can force you to like to realize you have to be adaptable. Yeah, like a self starter. I was gonna tell you, oh, you should do this. You should go do this, and so like those people get left behind essentially. So I think some of those kind of overarching things help a lot. A lot of I learned all that from my mom, like growing up. So I think that was probably the big overarching principles kind of helped me a bit and make me a bit driven in that way.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. 'Cause that's even like even the ability of us to have a conversation about other professions that have helped you out and seeing those parallels. I mean, that automatically, even not having talked with you before, that lets me know, like, okay, you're able to see that bigger picture of like, Dr. Dre sitting in the studio with 50 Cent. There are parallels to a speed session, whether you see it or not. Yeah. So that's really cool. That's cool. Cool. Any other?
What made you guys want to do the start the podcast?
Oh, I guess we've never talked about this. So this could be cool to put on an episode. We had been talking about it for a while as just like, we knew it was smart to start putting the infrastructure in place of some sort of side hustle. Just even if we're not planning on upscaling it in the near future, just having this structure in place of, owning the domain name, getting getting like the podcast hosting site all arranged and just get some sort of like brand name started with, you know, a logo and all that. But I mean, when we do get to the point where if we ever upscale it to the point of like real revenue generation, then we'll get to that point. But right now it's mostly been like putting forth information and leading conversations with other people in such a way that it almost acts as like a secondary digital resume, of like, hey, you know, even if you listen to something that we put out or read something that we put out and completely disagree with the ideas that we're saying, you could at least appreciate the thought processes that went behind it, and showing that, like, you know, because we've had people, different guests who completely disagree with each other, on one episode, and the next week it's somebody who thinks completely differently. But even like the ability to then lead and guide that and still have a good conversation with all those different people, is interesting and challenging. I don't know, even like it was funny, like listening back, even like our first episode that we recorded, and like the skill of like interviewing in this medium is interesting, and like it was challenging, and it was funny. My brother actually called me and was like, "Hey, you suck." And I was like, "Oh, God damn it!" Like, but he was like, but it was cool, because it was like, "Hey, you know, like, slow down. You're just talking. You're saying what you want to say, but you're just saying it a little too fast." You know, and it almost things like that. And I guess that also can get back to like, we're close enough that he's comfortable saying that, because and I was like, oh, and it was like, hey, because I do the exact same thing. He's an MD. He's like, I do the same thing talking to patients, and I have to slow down. And yeah, I guess I got a little off track, but an AC channel. But it was like, the ability to just have a platform to put out thoughts and ideas that almost acts as like a, you know, a secondary digital resume, essentially. And if we do get, you know, and then long-term secondary aspect of that is having the infrastructure and the behind-the-scenes stuff in place if we did want to upscale to like some sort of revenue generation type stuff.
I think what's huge is like, for us, I think we enjoy having solid conversations about anything related to performance. Like, when we appreciate people who clearly think at a high level and actually dissect things before they kind of like get into it and take into account a lot of the just different factors that can go into performance or anything related to thinking maybe a little bit differently than what most people do. I mean, a perfect example is like Tony Holler. A lot of people don't do things the way he does it in track, and people aren't always a huge fan of it. But you can't deny some of the success he's had, but also even just the thought that goes behind it. Like, it's all there. And I think there's a lot of people we've done that. I mean, Coach Sullivan was another one where it's a guy who's never played volleyball, but is one of the greatest coaches of all time. It's like, clearly he's challenging thought processes, and he wouldn't be as good as he was if he doesn't do that. So I think there's just a ton of value in hearing that, and just kind of like also promoting good thinkers, because I think our field can definitely benefit from having more of those.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think so. Me and James, our friend James, like he had this conversation also, like more as a field, we get like annoyed of, or we kind of crap on like those. We all know exactly. Once I say, we all know exactly what I'm talking about. Like those coaches who they put themselves out there. They kind of make us all look like idiots. Like they wear too tight t-shirts and like wear all kind of like douchebags. And I make a joke kind of a profession a bit. But I always say like, I think it's me playing devil's advocate or something like that. But it's, on the flip side, I'm like, I can applaud the ability to be transparent and the confidence to be like, I'm going to put myself out there. People aren't going to like it. No one's ever fully going to like everything you do anyway. So like, hey, it helps them in some way, if it makes them more money on secondary income, something like that, it's like good for them. But then we, or like coaches who don't behave that way, or like try not to make it look like a joke of a profession, like if we're not doing our own part to then counteract that, it's like we're part of the problem as well. It's like not enough coaches kind of put themselves out there in that way.
Yeah.
And that's something I learned from like reading things like Ray Dalio and like principles, Nassim Taleb and stuff like that, who are like, yeah, in the day you have to put yourself out there if you want to actually help yourself from a financial point of view, but help kind of like your profession essentially. It's like put more people in a limelight who are too tight t-shirt wearing douchebags. Like in the day, that's what it is. It's like, so we can't fully complain about it until we try to fix the problem.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's like, let's put more coaches who are really good, really smart. Maybe they wear too tight t-shirts, but they're good at the job.
I think there's value too of just, there's not a lot, and I'm not saying there's none, but there's not a lot of coaches who are like 10 years, maybe 15 years older than us, who actually do that, who want to have the conversations. Like one of the few I can think of, I know there's multiple, but like we had Hester on. He's one of the guys who like knows his shit and he's really on top of it. And he challenged himself to also like get way better, where I definitely can see where there's some older coaches who've been in there for a while where it's like frightening to have to try and actually look at yourself and like, am I missing the boat on something here because I've been doing it for 15 years, but they don't want to like fully admit it. I think what's nice is like a lot of people in our generation of coaches coming up are very open. Maybe it's just because we grew up around social media and like there's that kind of realm with it, but like we're very open to at least exposing things that we're doing, even if it's like, I actually have no idea what I'm doing with this, but it's an idea I had, and hopefully people will talk about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of principles like Ray Dalio talks about being like radically transparent and saying, hey, you gotta put yourself out there. And like there are some who disagree. There's always gonna be someone who disagrees. So that's just the way of the world.
Yeah. Exactly. And even from the aspect of like helping promote S&C as a profession, and just like where, the level of critical thought that goes into it. I think like what Kier's doing with his new podcast is like people that are kind of performance adjacent, who their stories can be applied to performance. Whereas we're definitely keeping in the realm of like performance, but trying to like guide the conversations in a way that it's almost the reverse, where like somebody outside could listen and still benefit from it. Whether it's like an MD or a psychologist or, somebody in some other random profession could hopefully listen to the sports performance talk. And even if they have no idea about what a max velocity day looks like, they can, we have enough like principle-based conversation around it that they could appreciate like, oh, okay, like these guys are actually putting a lot of thought behind this. And, there's a lot going the other way of like, hey, we're going to have this, this performance adjacent profession on, and you can apply it to performance. Whereas like we've almost been the flip of have performance people on and lead the conversation in a way that people can see it applies to a lot of areas as well. Yeah. Cool. All right. We can do like a hard ending and then we'll stop recording and then we can keep chatting after we're done recording.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good to me.
But, all right, cool. I'll just, I'll start the like little ending, but, cool. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Terrence. This is great. I know we kind of got into some specifics and then also kind of went all over the place, but I mean, that's what we love to do. So, really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, man. Thank you guys again for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a ton.